Harambe! Harambe!
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Harambe. Tonight we feature Dr. John Henrik Clarke, the Dean of all African American historians. And with me to tell us all about it is the man to put this very special piece together. I'm talking about my right arm, associate producer, Byron Crudup. Byron, why don't you share with our viewers exactly what Dr. John Henrik Clarke is all about?
Well, Chuck, it's very hard to summarize just how eminent an individual Dr. John Henrik Clarke is. He is mentor to people such as Dr. Molefi Asante at Temple. He was a mentor to Malcolm X. He's an authority on Marcus Garvey. He's written several books. Malcolm X, The Man and His Ideas. He's written books on Garvey. One thing that you have to remember in this interview is that the man is blind. He's getting on in years. He's approaching his 80s. And so we have to understand that. But I think that in spite of that, you'll get the message loud and clear that this man is very eminent. He has a powerful message. And I think that you'll enjoy the show immensely. Dr. Clarke, in view of the present world situation where the U.S. is in a position of being world policeman, if you will, how do you see the progress of what is commonly referred to as Pan-Africanism developing into the next century?
I think in the light of the attempt to recolonize Africa and to control the media and the African mind, Pan-Africanism is going to become more essential than ever, and more people are going to understand it. Pan-Africanism is no different from Pan-Europeanism. Pan-movements have existed all over the world, but no one gets overly excited about them until we began to produce these movements. I see no solution for African people except some form of Pan-Africanism and African nationalism. I think Africans throughout the whole world will have to come together as African people and march into the arena of power in the world and speak with a single voice. I see no other solution.
You have written extensively on the subject of cultural colonialism versus physical colonialism as it relates to Africa and African peoples around the world. Could you expound on that concept?
I think the best way to understand the subject is to at least talk away from the subject for a minute. Because for the last 500 years, this world has been ruled by European nationalism. And Europe has had one concept. And that concept is European dominance. It would be European dominance under the name of communism or socialism, under the name of fascism or capitalism, under the name of Christianity, but European dominance. And we have to realize that we live in a European conceived intellectual universe. I'm not advocating this for African people. I'm saying that African people need to claim all those things in the world that belongs to them, and that we can do this without destroying another people's culture, destroying another people's country, or taking a people out of history. We can do this without doing to other people all the cruel and tragic things that has been done to us.
What can we do as African Americans to expedite progress towards a better understanding of and mutual cooperation with African peoples worldwide?
We as African Americans are trying to improve the human relationship of African people worldwide, and we're also trying to get the various fragments of African people to understand each other, those in the Caribbean islands, those in South America, and those here in the United States, those in the Pacific, and those in Africa itself. We're trying to get across the point that we were never a minority, and that if you count all of us on the face of the earth, we number over 1 billion people. And once you get 1 billion people together, they're not going to have to worry about who's going to be their allies, so long as they become allies to themselves. They have to expand Pan-Africanism beyond its narrow base to a concept of an African world union.
What is your opinion about present African American leadership in terms of direction, goals, and achievement made over the last 20 or say 30 years?
African Americans, unfortunately and tragically, have more leaders and less leadership than any people in the whole of the African world. And a lot of the people who are pretending leadership are charlatans and pretenders. And yet among them, there has emerged some very able men worthy of the mantle of leadership. And because of the pretenders, they've gotten less attention than they deserve. I think our leaders in general misunderstand their mission. If you're the leaders of a people, then you have to get a mandate from the people. And if the people ask you, leader, where are you leading me? You must have a good answer for them. Not only where are you leading me, who are you leading me to, who are you leading me for? The true leader must be a messenger, delivering a message for the people, and not a charlatan imposing a message on the people. And that the leader that ignores this is not worthy of the name leader.
Dr. Clarke, you have extensive knowledge of Malcolm X. Did you know him personally? And if so, could you share some of your thoughts about him and his impact on this country, Africa, and the world in general?
I knew Malcolm X personally. I met him in 1958 when I was director of the African Heritage Expedition. And he was one of the exhibitors. The Nation of Islam was one of the exhibitors. And we were friends until his untimely death. He had a number of people that he related to who were not Muslims who furnished him information. And this is really what made him so sharp. And I was in the shadow cabinet furnishing him information on history. He was one of the fastest learners I've ever met in my life. I would have loved to have had him in a classroom. He would have gotten straight A's plus, because in addition to having a good memory, he has an excellent analytical mind. I think his loss was one of the great losses of leadership that the African American has sustained in this century, because I think he was the finest example of a leader to emerge directly from the working class of African Americans as against the pseudo middle class, where most of the leaders generally emerge.
Could you describe the differences between Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King from a personal and political perspective, and how each impacted on the civil rights movement?
Malcolm X and Dr. King was going in the same direction down different roads. They were not as much in conflict as most people would like for you to believe. There's nothing King advocated and nothing Malcolm advocated that was in conflict one to the other. They just advocated in different ways and advocated in more explicitly. Malcolm X was more rooted in the community, in the people, and King was rooted into a class who came to teach the lowly. Malcolm was rooted in a class that he was a part of the lowly. And that he had risen from the mire to be a man of substance. And he was trying to give them at least the impression that they could do the same. Martin Luther King was doing the same thing in a different way. The political impact was different because America would buy King's message as an alternative from the radical Malcolm. They both had tremendous political impact on this country. Malcolm had more impact abroad. Martin Luther King had, and the civil rights movement was better known But you could hear King's speech. It had substance, it had beauty, simplicity of a Malcolm X, coming from the common area of his people, but never losing the touch, and yet being as high as an aristocrat. He could speak to an audience. The scholar would understand, the layman would understand, and neither one would feel that they've been talked down to. He was probably one of the great imaginative orators of this time, as King was one of the great theoreticians, theologians of the time in which he lived. Both men were great in their own way, and we should stop putting one against the other, as we should stop putting Du Bois against Booker T. Washington and Du Bois against Marcus Garvey. We keep looking for contests, and we quite forget that sometimes two different men could be saying the same thing using different words,